Welcome to the show. Welcome to Rebels with a Heart. Ben Frasier. It's great to have you here, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Derek.
Yeah, it's been fun. We've had a chance to get to know each other a little bit over the last month after meeting at Sherm Visionaries, and obviously you're doing some great work in the space of people leadership and learn a little bit of your story. And I was just looking forward to highlighting you and what you're doing here on Rebels. So welcome to the community officially. I think I'll say to you or ask you off the bat. We talked a little bit about this before, but what does Rebels with a Heart mean to you? What is that, especially in the context of your most recent life experiences? How does that,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's a really good question, Derek. When I think of a rebel, I think of someone who is causing kind, respectful, but good disruption that needs to be felt, and innovation that needs to be brought forward, thinking that needs to be had. And you in the context of rebel with hearts,
yeah,
you're doing it in a way that advances the people strategies and how we look at us as human beings as we try to work and navigate life with each other in that kind and respectful area. So I thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about going against the grain and
yeah,
rethinking how we do stuff.
absolutely. So we're gonna talk a bit about going against the grain and redoing stuff and reinventing things in the context of people leadership and HR. But tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us about how this applies to your journey as a human being, as a leader, kind of how you got to where you are in your career and in your life.
It's a long story. I'll
Go
try
ahead.
to summarize this in a
Yeah.
way that it makes meaningful sense to folks listening today. I started in the finance sector. I have a bachelor's in business finance, and then went on to get my MBA with an emphasis in healthcare administration. And that was an exciting journey as I started my HR uh, life in benefits and grew up in benefits, and then moved on to employee relations, HR business partners, talent
Yeah.
acquisition, the whole HR function. Where I get my most enjoyment is in the strategy side, working with our executive team and advancing the people strategy as it aligns with the business side of the house. But really, what resonates for me, why I choose healthcare, why I continue moving forward in my life the way I am. My wife and I, we have six children, two of which are adopted out of the foster system as babies. They're not related, but have had an opportunity for our children and ourselves to serve our community in a way that really is impactful, to give back to the community in such a rich way that has been given to us, and we appreciate that. Another piece that really resonates with me is I'm part of the No One Dies Alone program
Mm.
at my organization, which means when a patient is close to passing away and they can't find family, or family can't come, whatever the situation is, I'm part of a special team where you might get a phone call that says, come sit with this patient while they pass. And so that's been a very meaningful experience as I've sat with patients who have passed to the other side and have held their hand and talked to them. And there are certainly heartbreaking situations, but life changing. And that continues to just be very meaningful in my life.
Thank you for sharing that, Ben. So I actually want to explore that a little bit more. So first off, I think to your comment earlier, healthcare is very ripe for disruption and for rebellious but heartful activities. I think there's a lot we can dig into on that. I'll make a provocative statement. We'll come back to that in a little bit, which is HR, at least pre-pandemic, had not historically been known for being rebellious, right? HR is oftentimes, reputationally known as being the enforcers of rules and policies. So I'm interested to hear how you are bucking the trend personally and how you're moving forward. But before we do that, I'm actually really interested to explore again a bit about this work, because this is a really unique. This is something that's never come up before. Like how did you end up working in the No One Dies Alone program? What was the inspiration for that? And I would love to hear some of the experiences that you've shared with people during that transition, because that's a really different type of work.
Yeah, it is. And it's a way that I think human resources can provide value in the business itself. I think a lot of people think HR is just about employees and enforcement, as you've mentioned, but we I think as an HR professional, you have to spend at least half your time in the business as you do in the function itself. But how I came about joining a program like that was really inspired by my brother Robert, who passed away when he was 18 years old in a car accident.
Mm.
And I remember, and I was in that car with him, and I remember
Okay.
when he passed away, and I watched him pass away, and as he was my best friend. We shared a bedroom our entire lives. And I remember going home from the hospital after that, thinking about how those doctors and physicians cared for me, how those nurses cared for me, cared for my brother. And it was a very life-changing moment as a 17-year-old young man
Yeah.
to now have a significant life choice in front of me about which direction my life was truly going to go.
Yeah.
And I've dedicated my life to living it in a way that would please my brother, please my family, please my community, and help those around me become better people.
Wow. That's, I can only imagine the impact that's had. And so when you look at the experience with Robert and you look at the experience with others that you've sat with in transition, is there a certain essence or are there certain experiences that are common? I mean, obviously, the work we're doing at LifeGuides. And so this is a really interesting kind of, again, it's a very unique, unexpected topic, which is part of the fun of these shows, right? So,
Yeah, it is. Well, I'm not sure that there's anything common
mm,
between each experience. I mean, sure, there's maybe common denominators, as someone passes away. But I've found when I walk into a room where a patient is about to pass, I introduce myself, even if they can't hear me, they may
yeah,
not know what's going on. I sit down, I'll hold their hand and I'll let them know that I'm here, that they're not alone, and we're going to go through this, in a sense together.
yeah,
And there are some situations where they are aware, and there are some where they're not. And it's very unique and different. It's just as unique and different as someone being born
yeah,
is. And I've seen four of my children born into the world. Each situation is different, and I think it's unique too when someone passes. And so it's a very humbling experience. It's one that enriches my life and gives
yeah.
me perspective. And it's something to be reverenced. And I think it's a kind of a sacred moment, if you will.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And to that point, is it something that it invokes in you every time it's the same, or is it different with each person? Like, is the experience for you different based on that person?
Well, it certainly increases my faith. It
Yeah,
increases my awareness of myself, and it reprioritizes my life. Here's an example. I
yeah,
remember one morning back earlier this year, it was a Monday morning going into the office, super busy. I'd woke up at 4:30 that morning and I was writing down all my priorities I needed to get done that day. And as I had jotted down and prioritized everything, I go into the office and I've got meetings that are back to back. It's going to be a crazy day. And at 8 a.m., I get a phone call that we have a patient that's going to be passing away. And they asked me to come over to the emergency department to sit with that patient. And I didn't have the time. I had no time for this particular event, but I knew I had to be there. So I cleared my plate, cleared my docket, and I went and sat with this patient. And this particular patient was female. She was, between, I don't know, maybe 70 years old or so. And I sat with her until she passed away. And that was probably 3 to 4 hours. And as soon as that event was done, and the doctors and the nurses came in and began shutting down equipment and everything, I said goodbye to her. And then I had to pivot, head right back to my office, jump right back into meetings, right back into action items, no time to spare. And what was interesting, that day started at 4:30 a.m. at my kitchen table with my list of priorities. I finally got back to the kitchen table at 9:30 p.m. that night, and I was looking at that list. And what I found was interesting is what I thought was important that I had to get done that day
mm,
wasn't actually what needed to be done. And it reprioritized my life. And so as I've been through these experiences many times, every time it's a different and refreshing experience that renews my faith in humanity. It renews my vigorousness to want to live and live life to the fullest.
Wow. I wrote that down. What actually needed to be done, right? That's an important statement, I feel, and something that so oftentimes we lose focus on. When we're going to your point, going through the activities rather than being intentional and aware of what's being kind of asked of us, for lack of a better term, to your point around faith. Um, was this something that you were doing? As I know you've been working in the healthcare space. Obviously, that's the industry. Was your organization providing this service during the pandemic? Was it
Yes.
suspended during the pandemic? Yeah, I was curious because I think we heard there's a lot of stories about people who have in fact passed alone. And so I'm just curious because is that a program that was being done in other hospitals and other programs, systems, and love your thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
I think the concept of a program called No One Dies Alone is not unique to my organization or to healthcare, but it is something that we did have during the pandemic. And I sat with a patient who passed away from COVID after being taken off a ventilator when he passed away. And he was a younger gentleman and his family couldn't be there. I'm not sure why, and that's not the biggest concern, but in my mind, it's just making sure that they're not alone, and especially during the pandemic when visitors were limited,
Right.
People might have been sick and couldn't be there. There's all myriad of reasons why someone might not be able to be with family when someone passes, but it's really critical that they not be alone.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And so coming back to full circle, when you think about just the contrast of how death shows you the preciousness of life, how are you showing up in your life, just continually now as you redefine what's next in your career and your progression
Yeah.
here? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, it's another good topic. Earlier this year, I was diagnosed with stage 3 kidney cancer, and as a 40-year-old male with no chronic conditions, not on any medications, that was a shocking diagnosis to hear,
Yeah.
and to be really close to stage 4 and not know that it was even in my body. It was a total fluke. We even discovered it. And as I took a step back at that moment, I remember my wife driving me home from the hospital after that diagnosis. And we didn't know at that point, had the cancer spread? How far
Yeah.
was it? What next steps were? So there was a lot of ambiguity, and we have 6 children, and I'm the
Yeah.
sole provider. And so all of these things are racing through my mind
I imagine.
about my life. How did I live it? And I know that sounds really maybe extreme, or maybe even what's the word I'm looking for? Dramatized. That's it. And but you have all these questions and you don't know. And so as I was going home, there was 2 things that really came to my mind. The first was, wow, I'm so proud of my family, my children, my wife, and what we've been able to build together, and that they're in good hands, that they're financially taken care of, that their intellectual, spiritual, and physical needs are met, and I knew my wife would be fine. But the part that I think bothered me the most, the second part of this, was the time I had spent in the office focusing on things that really hadn't moved the needle professionally, or for that really made a meaningful difference for employees in my organization. And it wasn't for a lack of effort, it wasn't for a lack of trying, it wasn't for a lack of wanting to do the right thing. All of those pieces were in place. But with these experiences of Robert, No One Dies Alone, and being diagnosed with cancer, I feel like there's just this teaching moment that
Yeah.
continues to resurface in my life of recentering and making sure I'm focused on my true north. And that was
Yeah.
a point in my life that redirected my attention to where I think next steps, that I need to go strategically with my career.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask the question directly because now this has come, even in the last 5 minutes, has come up twice. The work that actually needed to be done versus what you thought needed to be done, and then and then when you have a moment of your own mortality, what really matters, right? And
Yeah.
so, as you're now defining this, what what is really mattering to you? What is your North Star? How are you showing up as a quote unquote rebel with a heart? Or how are you starting to define that maybe? Because I know maybe you may not have clarity on that, but where are you moving in that direction?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there's two components of my life
Yeah.
that are really important to me, and they have strong overlap. And you can't have one without the other,
Right.
and so they're completely interconnected, but yet they're also distinctly separate. And the first is my family,
Mhm.
and my dedication to my wife Shauna, and to our children, and in our faith. And those in my mind are completely inseparable, and in a way they're my motivation. In fact, I have this policy called Frasier family first. And whenever I'm making a decision or something that's really important, I think of how is that going to impact my family, and does that move us forward toward our goals, to raise our children to be good community citizens and professionals. And then the second part of this equation is my career and the trajectory that it takes me, because I can't provide for my family if I don't take care of my employer. And if I'm not taking care of my employer, then I can't take care of my family. And so you got to have this right balance between the two to make sure that you're moving forward to your own true north. And my true north as an individual is being a good father, being a good husband, and being a good provider, and taking care of that which matters most. Because I think at the end of the day, it really isn't about what title you held professionally, or how much money you made, or how nice your house was, or how great your car was. It was how you treated people. And
Right.
that is how I think you be a rebel with a heart.
Beautiful. Well said. And I personally resonate with this, having been as a father myself and as a businessman, and developing this, and someone who aspires to make a big impact in the world. Right. So we share that. I'm curious, because I personally asked this question, and I continue to do it. How do you look at your time? And maybe a better question would be, how do you balance quantity and quality of time and experiences between your work and your family? That's, I think, really part what my personal process has been around this is when you look at your calendar and you look at we spend so much of our time working, right? That just seems
Yeah.
to be like, at least I personally do, right?
Yeah.
And I find I focus quality time in experiences with Erin, my wife, and our children, and others in our family. But it's definitely if you look at just pure volume, that out of alignment, if you will, right? So
Yeah.
how do you personally recalibrate that? And did your experience of looking at your mortality very directly change anything for you in how you calibrate that equation?
Yeah. So there's a lot baked into that question. Well, first,
Yeah.
I would say there's no magical answer to the balance. And your children and your spouse and those relationships are all very fluid, and needs are changing all the time. So in my mind, you have to be assessing it live and actively, if not on a daily basis and on a
Yeah.
weekly basis. So every week I carve out about 1 hour to take a look at how am I spending my time? How is my relationship with my children? Have I invested appropriately? How is my relationship with my wife? And so I have 1 hour of time every week where I check in and say, here's how I spent my week. Did it hit the mark? And what are my goals going to be the next week? And so I actually have a strategy that I have annually that looks at
Nice.
what is my mission? What are my coherent action steps? And what are the things that are getting in the way of me accomplishing those things? And then having that equilibrium. And then the other thing I would say, Derek, is this year I turned 40. And so I had this list of 40
Ew.
things I wanted to do in the year I turned 40. And on that list was like 40 dates with my wife.
Well,
And another one was 4 getaways with my wife with no children, just her and I, to get away, to go somewhere where we could invest in our marriage and in our relationship and build that capital that needs to be there. And so you have to be deliberate, you have to be purposeful, you have to have a goal, and you have to have time to calibrate it. And I think if you're spending that time being introspective and reflective, you're going to hit it just fine.
thank you. I think it's really said. And so that's an excellent process. And I do some of that, but I think I'm going to apply it further from what you just shared. How is that also translated into your work environment? How are you doing things differently in that context? And how are you imagining doing things differently as you kind of work towards that North Star and blending? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so in my mind, I always try to have about a 10-year outlook. Where are things going to be in 10 years? Professionally, personally, where are my children going to be in 10 years? Where's my marriage going to be in 10 years? Where's HR going to be in 10 years? Where's healthcare going to be in 10 years? And you always have to have this mindset of essentially looking over the rainbow, anticipating what change is going to happen. And if you're not anticipating what change is going to happen, what do you want to see happen? Where do you want to be in 10
Yeah.
years? How does this need to be? Because I actually like to be a pace setter. And my leadership style is to set the pace. And it's a combination of pace setting and coaching. And so I'm not a micromanager. I'm not someone that's going to be giving orders. That's not it. It's where does this individual want to grow as a person and professionally and have a development plan that gets them where they want to go? And then also setting the pace and mirroring and matching that people alignment to the business objectives. And so
Yeah.
working with your executive team, where are we going in 10 years? Who are the market disruptors? Where are they trying to take the market?
Yeah.
How do we need to react and how do we need to proactively be in front of them? And so I don't think you can have one without the other. It's that tricky, careful balance of all of that together.
I think that's an excellent exercise. And that's something that I think is not, because I personally don't do it enough, really think through intentionally 10 years out in these different lenses. So when you kind of focus again on the back to the rebels in the work environment, when you look at HR, when you look at people leadership and management, when you look at the healthcare industry, how are you setting yourself up in the coming decade as a quote unquote disruptor, as a rebel, as a leader? What are you seeing right now? How are you moving toward that? What are you leading? Where are you going with this?
Well, so I spend a lot of time, and Derek, we both had the
Yeah.
opportunity to attend the SHRM Visionary Conference. Spending time with leaders from some of the largest organizations in the country, getting on the phone with the CHROs and the key business leaders that are driving the innovation and the change. It's going to the conferences that where you're hearing about where other business leaders are seeing their industries and where their growth opportunities are. And so first, I think you have to be really aware of your competition, where they're going, and then also baking into your own mindset, where do you want to go? Where do you want to take your organization? What are they doing that you're not doing? And I've had wonderful opportunities. I won't name them on this call, but many very large Fortune 100 companies where I've been talking to them, speaking with them, understanding their direction. And ironically, they're very willing to share and give insights. And so as I've taken in that information, I look at the market disruptors in healthcare and in human resources, and I have a strategic plan about where I want to go in my career, the companies I'm looking at that I want to join, the companies that have a strategic vision that are market disruptors. I find that very exciting. And I'm excited about the future. I have a lot of hope in humanity. I know that we as a country have a lot of things we're all dealing with on a variety of levels, whether it's the economy, social dynamics, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And all of these can come together. And I have a lot of hope and action steps that are going into building better communities and building a better family.
Beautiful. So with that is a very good tee up. It's hard to believe our time has flown by so quickly. What would your piece of advice be in that context of hope, as a context of a rebel leader, of an HR leader, of a people leader? What would you leave our community with in that context of what they should be doing themselves?
Yeah. Well, so what I would do is if I was a young professional trying to find your way, or an advanced professional looking to advance skill sets or looking to develop a learning mindset, is find a good mentor. Find good leaders that can take you under their wing and guide you and help you. And if you've been so fortunate to have those mentors and guides to help you, to turn around and give that back to those leaders that are up and coming, and to help them advance our craft and our profession to the next level by investing in the leadership that's coming with us and behind us, so that they can move in front of us in a proactive way. And so you get what you give. And I love to inject positivity into that spin cycle, because I know what goes around comes around. And the more I give of myself and the more I give of our family and our resources, it comes back to me in so many ways. And so find that person that needs help and help them. Be willing to give and invest in your community. And that's what I would leave, individuals listening to this podcast today.
Well, Ben, I'm very grateful to have a friend like you. I'm grateful that there's a leader like you out in the marketplace, that you're out there doing this work. I think your actions speak volumes of how you show up, and I'm grateful that you're doing that. Thank you for joining us and blessing the audience with your words, with your wisdom and your heart today. And for the listeners, how can they connect with you? How can they learn more about you? Anything you'd like to share in that regard?
Yeah, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ben Frasier. Also, feel free to email me, benfrasier@outlook.com. I'd love to hear from you. Reach out. And if you need help, I'll gladly provide whatever resources and connect you with whoever in my network would be valuable to you.
Amazing. Ben, thank you again. And thank you to all of you for joining us today with Rebels with a Heart.